Scream 2 is a sequel about sequels, but is it a good sequel? Let's talk about Scream 2.
Hello, everyone. Welcome back. We are back, the Eye of the Storm podcast. We're just going to get straight into today's discussion or continue the debate. We'll see. Danny G, please tell the people what we're going to be discussing today.
So this is Have You Seen, in which we talk about a movie that some of us know well and others have just seen for the first time. Today we're talking about Scream 2 from 1997, which I've seen a couple of times and the two of you have just seen for the first time. So what are your thoughts on Scream 2?
I'm going to caveat that, actually. As I was watching it, I realized I had seen it before, but a very long time. But there was a lot of reminders. Obviously, I had to be reminded about a lot of things that happened in the movie. But I wouldn't say it's first time, but it's definitely a fresh take on on the Scream 2 movie. But in saying that, Scream 2 is very enjoyable, and I actually feel like Scream, the Scream franchise, is my favorite slasher franchise, and the reason for that is 100% because of the absurdity of the action and the absurdity of the killings that are happening in this, especially when the Scream is chasing people around and he's falling over stuff and it's over dramatic. I don't know why, it's just pure entertainment on that part. And for me, I felt like it built on the first movie really well, and for me probably a slightly better, more enjoyable movie than the first movie as a whole, actually. And yeah, it was just thoroughly enjoyable without kind of going into specifics, which we'll obviously do in a bit. But for me, it just kind of built really well on the first, gave me more of the entertaining action that I come to enjoy from this franchise. Added sensible and again reasonable enough story, and when it came to the actual reveal as to who the killers were, good enough motivation as to why they were doing what they were doing.
For me, it was entertaining. I think with the Scream franchise, it's entertaining. I do think it's repetitive and there's nothing new, which is kind of there's pretty much nothing new which is done in each movie. Well, from the ones that I've seen, this one, I don't remember me watching this one. So I pretty much watched this for the first time. So when I watched the second one, there wasn't anything done that was new. However, it was a fun watch. So I take it for how it is, and I'll definitely say this one was more enjoyable than the first one. That's something I would agree on. And I just love how they still kind of build up on Ghostface, and not even build up, but they just kind of make it clear that this guy is just a normal guy that pranks calls his victims before he gruesomely kills them. And you can tell movies are a heavy influence on his character as well. And they discussed that throughout the movie as well. I remember there was a scene where they were in the classroom, and then the question came about where in terms of if movies pretty much influence the killers, right? So it's it's kind of it makes it more gut wrenching and gives it a more realer feel when the actual killer isn't someone that's his character motivation, or even though his character motivation is in relation to obviously them being done dirty, as in obviously today's character, as in the Ghostface killer's character motivation in this movie, it is personal, but it's not I think a lot of the reasons for other character motivations for other villains, and I'm trying to say I just enjoy the fact that this one's just more realer. I think the other character motivations in other movies, it isn't as personal, and it is personal, but it's kind of exaggerated in a way, if that makes sense. This one is a domino effect, which I enjoy. It's okay, so you kill one Ghostface, but then that will lead into the birth of the second Ghostface in the second movie, and then so on. So yeah, man, I think I enjoy the whole domino effect reasoning for why Ghostface, even for Ghostface's motivation, is pretty much the highlight for me when it comes to Scream, of course. That iconic character. So yeah.
So even though you guys have seen Scream 2 before, technically you have seen it before, you didn't have detailed memories of it, right? So essentially plot-wise, it was still fresh, right? A fresh experience, right? So what did you think about the opening? So about the revelation that the plot of the first movie has been turned into a movie in the second movie, and the next killings happen during a showing of the movie that's an adaptation of the first movie. What was your reaction to that?
I liked it because it was kind of like a reflection of how society is when it comes to like, true crime. Like we can turn it into movies, right? So, like for example, we did it with Jeffrey Dahmer on the Netflix series. Do you know what I'm saying? So, them actually watching a true event, it made sense.
It's almost like what we do with, these serial killers like Jack the Ripper. I think they mentioned Ted Bundy in this movie as well. Is that we, over time, they're just like kind of like put on this like sort of certain like celebrity level status, and they're like sort of made to be famous and this and the other. And it seemed like that was like a bit of a sort of a bit of a sort of discussion on that. And then for Ghostface to actually kill Jada Pinkett in the actual cinema as the movie was going on, it seemed like it was slightly like a meta commentary in terms of like, does consuming this type of media cause people to sort of act out in violent manner? And there's been lots of debates about this around video games and other movies and things like that, and as well in kind of music and other forms of entertainment, like the effects of it on people that are consuming it. And it felt like by the end of the movie, the film had the stance that it was just rubbish, like it's a poor excuse for why people do what they do. And when the Ghostface, the male Ghostface, that's revealed at the end, I can't remember his name, when he's like kind of going on this spiel about how he's going to use it as like his like ultimate defense to get away with it because he was influenced by the movies and the other, and the movie essentially just kind of like laughed at him like, are you being for real? Like you think that that's actually gonna work for you? So it was quite interesting in that sense. Like I feel it worked. I feel it worked for the movie in terms of sort of the commentary it was trying to make at the start, just about like entertainment's influence on people and how we kind of like immortalize and raise certain killers to celebrity status as well, and make just entertainment out of real events.
I don't think the movie goes very far in its commentary on this, right? Like it doesn't really take much of a stance other than portraying the like motivation of the killer in the end gives about having seen too many movies, and it's clear that it's an excuse, right? He just wants to play everybody, and he wants to kind of show how hypocritical they are and so on. But that is something that was really in the zeitgeist in the late 90s, early 2000s, right? I've sat through this kind of seminars, kinds of things in school where they told us how dangerous video games were, and there were these debates in politics and the media and stuff like that, where these were relatively new, not movies specifically, but video games specifically, were new things, and kind of society was freaking out about what they were doing to the youths. But then when you go back 100 years, they were saying the same thing about novels. Like it's actually really amusing that if you look up the moral panic around novels like 100 years earlier, people were convinced that it would break people's minds, that they could no longer distinguish reality from fiction and stuff like that. So this has been going on for as long as fiction has existed. And I think that is something that's really like that they kind of lean into here as well. And then there's the whole thing about the serial killers being kind of immortalized in fiction. Like if you ever want to look up like that connection between slasher movies and serial killers, look up Ed Gein. Basically everything you think about serial killers is basically Ed Gein. Like the whole thing about wearing people's skin as a mask and all sorts of things. Like that's basically with this one guy that kind of spawned at least 2 major slasher franchises. So like this whole thing about fact and fiction and reality and art imitating each other and causing each other, that kind of thing has been around for decades, and I think that really comes together here.
I was gonna say, what was the opinion that was actually given, as in the final opinion, in terms of? I think I missed it, in terms of if media pretty much has an influence on
in the movie
crime. Yeah, did they have a final opinion?
So to me, it really came across as being an excuse, right? Because like he's got this whole plan about how he wants to get away with a perfect crime, right? And so he has this whole plan about blaming the movies, and the religious right will pay his legal fees because they want to prove that movies are corrupting the youth and stuff like that, right? So he's got this entire thing planned out, and it basically amounts to kind of making a fool of everybody, right? Because he just wants to be smarter than everybody else is kind of my takeaway from it. That was my reading of it. Obviously, what part of that is honest and which isn't, and which part is just kind of fever fantasy on his part, I think it's up for debate. Like that's basically what he's trying to get at.
So it wasn't even personal for him then?
Well, we have again the same thing as in the first movie, right?
Yeah, it's the same formula.
One, it's this abstract philosophical point about movies or being able to blame movies and how society engages with fiction and that sort of thing. And for the other killer, it's personal. We had the same kind of dichotomy in the first movie, right? For one, it was about personal revenge and for the other it was basically because I can.
I'm just trying to think if that's like a strong enough character motivation. Of course, like you could say, obviously the personal character motivation kind of compensates for, and pretty much they're just using that character to kind of like spread a message. But I'm just trying to understand, what is the purpose of them trying to spread a message? Is it just to obviously tell us that, no, media, obviously people that says media is a big influence is just an excuse? If that's the case, then that's great. But if there's something else, I don't know.
think this movie has a message, at least as far as that goes. I don't think it takes a really strong stance either way on what the impact of fiction is. Like I think like throughout the first two movies that we've seen so far, I think there's this pattern of people not taking things seriously and thinking that everything is a joke, and like fact and fiction kind of blurring, right? Like I think in the first movie, I thought this was really clear, where the movies inspire the killings, and then the killings inspire the media, and the media then creates fiction based on what really happened. And now the fiction of what the reporters, the fiction the reporters were creating has been turned into actual fiction in the form of a movie, and that movie then inspires copycat killers. So this whole cycle like is very central in these two movies so far, right? But I'm not sure that really maps to reality in any real way. There have been like things like, do you know about the Slenderman killings? So Slenderman is like this horror creature that was made up in like 2014 or something on a message board. And we have the post, like the forum post, where somebody makes up this monster, right? There's this creepy looking guy, tall, elongated limbs. I think his face is blurry or something. And there's at least one case where there were these two teenage girls who believed that Slenderman was real and that he wanted him to kill their friend, and so they did. At least that's what they said. So in some way, this happens in that somebody kind of kills somebody or commits some kind of crime, and then either blames it on or seems to have been inspired by movies or fiction. But I'm always kind of skeptical about that. I think there's always something else going on. Like they would have done this anyway, and they kind of just reached for an explanation or for some kind of rationalization, I think. And saying I saw it like that in the movies, where if they hadn't seen that movie, they still would have done it, but they would just blame something else, or they would have done it, would have taken a different form. But people don't go out and do like violent things because of movies, right? So this whole cycle of fact inspiring fiction, inspiring fact, that's in these movies, it's heightened because it's satire, but I don't think it really maps to very much in the real world. I don't think.
And you can see it in the movie, and whilst they don't kind of bash the message throughout the entire movie, but it's just like that final act in terms of like even how the mother even came in contact with him was through a forum, because she was trying to find someone that was like a psychotic killer essentially. So she engaged with him because he already had like those kind of like tendencies, or she believed that he had tendencies to kind of be a serial killer or something.
He had these tendencies, and she was looking for somebody who did, right?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, that's what I'm saying. Yeah, so she was looking for someone that fit his kind of like psyche, and then again, it just seemed like the movie was kind of like hitting home that message in terms of, you think that these forms of entertainment are the reasons why people are doing these things, but if you actually look at the person behind it, is that he was already he already had the psyche to be a killer. He already had the psyche to be a serial killer, and he was just kind of like, again, like you said, just like using it as an excuse.
I don't know that what we've been talking about is kind of the main thrust of the movie. Like this whole thing, do people do violence because of movies? I'm not sure that's really what they're getting at. I think what they're more getting at is how the media kind of reports on crimes is kind of fictionalized in a way, and people treat it as entertainment in some way. And I think that's even gotten stronger with things like true crime. Like podcasts didn't exist at the time this movie was made. But now that's one of the most popular genres, right? Where people just get entertainment from just following the like real crimes and the suffering of real people, right? And I'm not judging that, right? It's not something I particularly enjoy, but I don't think there's anything wrong with that, right? But there's even more of that today than there was in the 90s, right?
Yeah.
One other thing that's really big in this movie is Sidney. Like Sidney's arc, right? She's a very different person than she was at the start of the first movie. Like our first impression of Sidney that we get in this movie is that she gets a prank call with essentially a death threat. and she's got a caller ID device, and she threatens the caller with legal action. Right? That's her method of self-defense. And I think we're starting to see at this point really how she's kind of transcend. Like, she was the victim in the first movie, and she's learned from that, is now on the path to kind of protecting herself, right, in case this happens again. So what was your impression of her, and both the initial sequence where we see how she's been changed by the first movie, and just how she behaves throughout the movie?
I don't know, I do see, of course, like I do see growth in her character when it comes to, like, being more, I can't even say she was a bit to herself, because even when she started, it seems like she's still comfortable around people, but that's obviously that's obviously before knowing, well, that's before thinking that Ghostface was pretty much dead, and obviously she ends up seeing on the TV that he's back, saying he could be, there could be a new Ghostface. But then she still seemed a bit, I wouldn't say oblivious, but I didn't really see much growth for me personally, in the first movie, and in the second one, she still seemed kind of like, I understand why she wouldn't trust a lot of people. Like, even the scene with her boyfriend, right, where she didn't know whether or not to trust him, that makes sense, obviously, because obviously she learned from the first movie. So that in a way is changed. So yeah, that is changed. I do see some development, but I don't know. She just seemed very like, she still kind of seemed like the same character, because she didn't really seem like the typical victim. Do you know what I'm saying? Like, she seemed like a victim that had backbone, and I still saw that in this one. So that's why I wasn't really like, her development in terms of how she changed from the first movie to the second movie, it wasn't so apparent for me, because I always felt like she was like she had like a badass in her, if that made sense. Do you know what I'm saying? So she wasn't just like a fragile little girl that's getting chased by a killer. Like, she seemed like like I said, she handles business. Do you know what I'm saying? So she had like that fiery. She always had that fiery side. So I didn't really see that much of a development, besides being more paranoid and being more aware, and just like being not suspicious, but just being more. But when it comes to her surroundings, just not trusting people. So you know what I'm saying. So I think
I'd say she's prepared, or has been prepared.
Yeah. So
right?
yeah. So I'll say probably, yeah. I'll say that too, being more prepared. But in terms of, I don't know. I probably wanted to see, I don't know, maybe like a change in her. I can't really say change in her personality or character, but something. I don't know, something a bit more. As in that, I don't know, just something that kind of like shows that she's. But to be fair, there's a lot of screams. So I don't know how many movies she's in. So there's gradual progression. So I'll kind of like retract what I'm saying.
I mean, at the start of this movie, like, she's had this one experience, right? It's not defined her life exactly.
Yeah.
Right. So I think there's very visible growth and kind of attempts to kind of move on and prepare in case it happens again happening, right? And the whole thing about the caller ID device is part of that, but also how I think you can see it in how the way she interacts with everybody else, right? Like, where she treats her boyfriend as well, right? Like, he's always at a little bit of a distance, and she's very quick to suspect him when another killer shows up, right? And she has good reason for that, because she's been through that once before. But it does mean that she's trying to prevent it from happening again, right? And she's trying to be in a stronger position next time it happens. That's kind of my takeaway.
No, I was gonna say I kind of agree with Jonathan on this one, just because it, like, there was shown in the first movie that she did have a little bit of something about her, a little bit of fire, especially when she punched the reporter Courtney Cox's character in the face in the first movie. It showed that she had like something about her in this. I didn't quite get a strong character development. Like, I did recognize moments in where she was a little bit more streetwise, or a little bit sort of, wanting to face her fears a little bit more in this movie. So like, I think there was like a scene where she's kind of like walking out of the house, and then the phone rings, and she's at first hesitant about the phone, and she's like kind of sort of cautious of it. But then she wants to like face her fears, and she actually goes to answer the phone, and this is after knowing that Ghostface is back, and Ghostface is actually sort of like terrorizing, and she wants to kind of sort of tackle that head on. And then of course, when they're sneaking out of the police car, and then they kind of run away, or they go like a little bit further up the road, and she's like, no, I actually like want to face my fears. So like there was like moments like that throughout the movie where she's trying to be stronger in herself, but at the same time, it didn't feel like there was drastically a different character. There were just like small things that you can kind of like pick up and notice on in this movie, and maybe it would have been interesting to see her paired up with Dewey, the police officer from her town, the reporter, and the other guy that had like a lot of sort of knowledge on movies, the one that ended up getting sort of killed. It maybe would have been interesting to see her kind of like pair up with them to try and do a bit of investigative work to see like kind of like what's going on, just to kind of like show that she's, you know, instead of being reactive, she's now proactive, and she's actually, you know, the one that's going after Ghostface. But overall, like again, she was, you know, still a good character in this, but I don't know, maybe have more examples as to where she was, you know, a bit more advanced than kind of what I think she was in this.
To add on to that, just like to show how impacted she was from obviously what happened in her first encounter. Because yeah, you're right. In terms of like the whole phone, what was the phone thing that shows your name? What was it called again?
Call ID.
Call ID. Yeah, that was good that they showed that, but I think they should have been, you know, just a bit more, just to show that how much of an impact that the first encounter with Ghostface had on her. Because like I said, there's a gradual progression to like a character change, and I do believe that. I don't know if she's going to be in the third or fourth movie. Was she in the third movie?
She's in the third. I don't think in the fourth. I'm not sure.
Okay, cool. So it'll be interesting to see if she's done that, if she's like fully changed or if she hasn't. Wait, but does she need to change? That's the question.
Well, it's her story, right? Like,
yeah.
Like maybe in the first movie, it's not immediately clear whose story it is, but she's definitely the main character in this, right? And the whole thing is about her trying to live through and survive these things, and trying to survive in the first instance, but then also move on and not letting herself be defined by it, right? Like this whole thing about being at university and trying to become an actor, all of these things are risks, right? Like these are all things that potentially put her in danger or draw attention to her or something. And if she really wanted to prevent something like the first movie happening again, then she probably would keep a lower profile and that sort of thing. I think what we're seeing is two things. One is she's trying to move on. She's trying to not be defined by it. But at the same time, she's trying to be in a stronger position if it happens again. I think those two things are going on.
Yeah, but that already kind of happened in terms of like her trying to move past something. That was like in the first movie as well, where she was trying to move past her whole her mother's death, and in terms of like the reputation that her mom had around town. And that's the reason why I say I find it like, I think it's hard to kind of like see her change and her character arc, because the already tone that's been set for her character is pretty much dark, as in not dark but cold, right? Cold to her environment because of obviously, you know, what happened to her mother. So kind of like, where does her change lead to? Because usually when it comes to like a character arc, then someone changes from light to dark, right? So maybe they start off as a bubbly character, and then let's say in the next movie they're more depressed, sad, and in the third movie they're more hardcore and more like a hunter, right? But with her, it's like she already started off pretty much reserved in a way and cold when it comes to everyone else. So it's like, what did she transform into in her? You know what I'm saying? Does that make sense?
I don't know that our character arc has to go in that way. It just has to be a change in the person. Like
no, it doesn't have to be in that way. But I'm just saying, I wonder where, like, what is her character going to change into? Because she was really cold from the get-go.
Well, she was a regular person in the first movie, right? And basically, like, this thing about the mother dying is not, like, that's not that extraordinary, right? Like, that's,
her mother died in a gruesome way, though. She got
sure, you know. But like it's something that happens to people, right? It's not quite the same thing as being stalked by a serial killer, right? Like that is extraordinary and it's a shock, right? Whereas just losing a parent, like it's like, I think we've seen her move on, like at the start of the first movie, right? It's been what, a year at least? I don't remember exactly, but it's been a while. And they've both she and her father have moved on broadly, and I think that's different than the lessons that she learned from. Like, she didn't necessarily learn a lesson in terms of like a change in her personality, but it did change her in terms of how she relates to her environment and to other people and things like that. And I think, like, you're right that was there in the first movie, but that is now her primary personality trait, right? Because it's the thing that's let her survive this kind of crisis once. I think there's a Sarah Connor thing going on here, where in the first movie, those same personality traits are more of a reflex and like a survival instinct. And in the second movie, they're cultivated and deliberate. I think it's that kind of difference.
Okay, I can see that.
All right, moving on from Sidney, unless we've got something else to say about her. One character I really enjoyed was Cotton in this. Like, he was not really a major factor in the first movie, right? But here he's really central, right? So what did you think about him?
I didn't like him. He annoyed me every time he was on screen, if I'm honest. He seemed like I get for the movie, like the story that they were trying to tell, like he was there, but it just seemed unnecessary for him to be like chasing this like 15 minutes of fame and being like so creepy. It seemed like he was more there, like in my opinion, to be like a red herring in terms of like his like demeanor and like sort of how he came across, and sort of even like the situation where he had like Dewey's blood in his hands and this that, and the other. It just seemed like he was there to be a red herring, and just like, yeah, he just annoyed me anytime he was on screen, because it's just like his character motivation of like trying to chase his like 15 minutes of fame. Maybe at that point it was sort of more relevant in terms of sort of you've had this like big thing, and you really want to get on like TV and like have your moment in back in like 1997, but I don't know, I just couldn't relate to it as well in 2024. I mean, it's funny enough because everyone's trying to have their 15 minutes of fame on social media, online, and doing like ridiculous things to sort of kind of like go viral and stuff like that. But his character just like grated me every time he was on screen.
I didn't take it as he wants to be famous. I took it as he's already paid the price, and now he wants the reward. Right? So he's already spent a year of his life in prison for something he didn't do. And now he wants to get paid. And people keep trying to cheat him out of that payday, right? So Gail and Sidney and whoever else who's not being cooperative. And that is why he's so insistent, because that's probably his one chance. Like, it's not like he'll have another chance, right? Mm-hmm. The book has been written, the movie has been made, and he hasn't seen any of the money, right? But he's already paid the price with his with a year of his life, right? So yeah. I think he's pretty sympathetic. Like, he is like overbearing and he's pushy and all of that. But in terms of where he's coming from, I thought he was quite sympathetic, because he was thrown into this, like, he was framed for this, right? And if I remember correctly from the first movie, he's just some guy, right? There's no reason why he was framed as opposed to somebody else. And so he kind of got just caught up in this, and now he wants some kind of compensation. And if this doesn't work out for him, then nothing will, right? Then he's missed his window. Then the world has moved on. The story has been told. Somebody else got paid. And I think that is why he gets increasingly insistent and pushy over the course of the movie, right? Because initially Gail lies to him about having set up an interview between him and Sidney, which turned out to be a lie. And he's furious when he finds out about that. And from that point on, he gets increasingly insistent towards Sidney, because if Gail is not going to help him, then the list of people who might is getting shorter and shorter, right? So I think that's interesting stuff going on here, especially when we're talking about this whole thing about fact and fiction and how reporters creating the reality they report on and stuff like that. Like, he's basically kind of a victim of that, but also he basically says, all right, given that I'm already in this position, I want to at least not walk away empty-handed. So I think there's some interesting stuff going on here, because now his entire life kind of revolves around this episode that he basically doesn't have anything to do with, right?
No, that's true. That's true. And I agree with what you're saying in terms of like the sort of kind of like the story behind his character, and I can kind of like recognize it throughout the movie. But maybe it was the way that it was acted, or maybe it was the way that it was sort of kind of like portrayed through the movie, which didn't just like bode well with me, because he's
definitely supposed to be off-putting, right? And he's aggressive and all of that. But I do think the movie sold me on why he is that way.
Which is fair. I don't know. It just didn't work for me. It just didn't work for me. But I don't know, Jonathan, what was your opinion on that?
Well, I was actually going to say, I don't think his reasoning or character motivation for why he was the way that he was something which was a justification for me. Like, I just thought his character wasn't a highlight for me, but he was an interesting character. Two reasons. Well, just one reason, but I'll say that one reason before I kind of like address this one. The reason why, like, I understand that he's pretty much hard done by in terms of just like, being falsely accused and obviously not being paid for his books and etc. etc. I get that, but it was just the unnecessary, like, creepy. And I think what would have made sense was like not a backstory, but like I get that society's done you wrong, but for you to act in that way didn't necessarily make it doesn't. I don't get why it translates into you being now, just creepy. Do you get what I'm saying?
I'd say he's desperate. He's desperate
Yeah,
because he has one chance of getting something out of this, and that window is closing.
I understand. Okay, I can see it from. I understand. However, what I was gonna also say was I do kind of see why Sydney wrongly accused him or would have thought that he was responsible for his mother's murder the way that he was acting. So that did tell me a lot, because if I was thinking like how could you, like, what I'm saying, obviously in the first one the question was if she wrongly accused the wrong person for the murder of her mother, right? So I think with that, right, I was like, okay, I was thinking to myself, how the hell could she just like, for unless she saw him, how could she just falsely accuse someone? And even though she didn't fully like properly see the person, I do understand why she would think it would be him just based on the way that he was acting in the movie. Because yeah, it was creepy, and there was times where he showed like moments of rage. I was like, yeah, I could. His character made sense for why he was there. It was just the way that he was behaving. I think if we saw his character beforehand, then I think him acting just unnecessarily creepy would have made sense. But now, Daniel, that you added, okay, that was pretty much his last chance of reaping his rewards, of not gaining his rewards, same thing. But yeah, I would now kind of like make sense of how that can like lead to desperation, which desperation leads into you acting creepy. So I get that. But yeah, his character, all in all, his character for me, it wasn't a highlight. He was interesting. He was interesting, and it answered questions for me in terms of like Sydney falsely accusing him before, because I would suspect him. Like I would pretty much like I would suspect him to be responsible for my mother's murder as well if someone's behaving that way as well. You know what I'm saying? So, and she knows him. You know what I'm saying? So she beans around him, and obviously we saw especially that scene where them two were communicating in the library where he grabbed her arms. I'm like, yeah, okay. Yeah, this guy, I wouldn't even be surprised if he's Ghostface. Even though it's predictable, I wouldn't be surprised because, he's showing moments of, he had killer eyes.
One of the things that's interesting about this movie is that like this whole thing is about like fact and fiction kind of inspiring each other and changing each other, right? And this is actually the first movie in which the script was leaked to the internet and they had to reshoot the movie because of that.
It makes me curious as to like, even when she was like talking about like the whole like forum thing, and I don't know whether Daniel, I don't know if you've had experience with like internet back then, but just like what the internet was like and like how people interact with it, because it just kind of like blows my mind. Because like even when I had access to the internet, like very early on, it seemed quite like a little bit like, I don't know, further developed. I don't know, just like the idea of people like in '97 like being on like forums and stuff like that. I don't know, it's just like difficult to picture.
I mean, chat rooms existed, message boards existed, but it was very much experimental and nobody was paying attention. The portrayal is not realistic, like in terms of like what it looks like when they show like a chat room or an instant message or something. But those technologies existed. But that was kind of on the cutting edge pretty much for the time, I think. And like being aware of it to the point where they have to redo the movie essentially because of what happens online. I think that's probably pushing some boundaries.
Yeah. Is that like the first instance of something like that happening?
As far as I know, yeah. Like in terms of having to change the movie because of what happens on the internet, I believe so, yeah. That's
interesting. Interesting fact about the movie, actually.
So we've talked a lot about how this is a sequel, and there's a lot of like talk about sequels in the movie, right? There's this big debate in the film class about good sequels or whether sequels can be good or what qualifies as a sequel. And that raises the question, is this a good sequel?
I think it's a good sequel. I think it builds, like you said, it builds on what came in the previous movie, and I think it's mentioned in the movie as well in terms of like more killings and maybe even like more elaborate killings in this, and you definitely get that with the most shocking one was like the police car one, where it literally just came out of nowhere and like butchered the police. So definitely on sort of the entertainment aspect of it lived up to that. It furthered the character development of some of the characters in this. Of course, the reporter who was, what's her name? Gail. Yeah, like Gail. Obviously, like Sydney had some changes to her as well. Obviously, like Dewey and stuff like that as well. Gail's one was like actually most interesting to me. I know it wasn't a big focus of it, but just her being on the other side. So obviously we see her in the first movie being an overbearing reporter, kind of doing everything that she can to sort of get the story get her story. And then on this side, you've got the other reporter who sort of maybe like beats her to the scoop on certain scenes, is sort of kind of like chasing her down and asking her questions in like sort of a stressful situation. So it was just quite interesting to sort of see her in that perspective, being on the other side of that as well. So yeah, I think for me, anyways, it did a lot of good things to sort of build on the first one and make it a better movie than what the first one was.
Yeah, I think it's bigger, and I think the kills. I think the kills in the first are great as well, but here they're a little bit more elaborate. I think the opening sequence in the theater, I think is probably my favorite.
Yeah, that definitely set the tone.
Yeah,
right. Like it sets the tone. But it's also bigger, and it's not just a repeat of what happens in the first movie. It's kind of the logical extension.
Do you know what's hilarious? And I know we talked about this in the last movie, but I fell for it again. Like I put on Scream 2, and I was like, oh, Jada Pinkett's in this movie. And then as she was like dying in the first part of the movie, I was like, oh, they've done it again. And I was like, they actually got me with this one. Because I genuinely thought, I was like, oh, I'm interested to see what she's like in this movie. And they completely got me with it. Yeah, they did well with that one.
Got you in what way?
Remember, like, because like in the first movie, you were saying that, you know, they had like Drew Barrymore all over like the advertising and the posters and stuff like that. They thought that she was going to be the main star of the movie, and then she gets killed. And that literally happened to me with Jada Pinkett. More so because I was like curious to see her in this world. And then she died, and I was like, well done. I was like, well done, you got me. It was stupid of me not to.
I didn't think she was gonna get killed so soon. So when it happened, I was like, oh shit, the shock factor. I was like, damn. But yeah, her killing was brutal. And that definitely set the tone for me. Just I knew it was gonna be okay. The way that he even killed her, like the way he was stabbing her in her back, I was like, damn. I was like, yo, I can tell this movie is gonna be not gut wrenching, but we're gonna see a lot of blood. I wouldn't be surprised if we saw guts. I don't know if we saw guts, but I don't remember if we saw any guts.
I don't think so. Just a bunch of blood. But I think one of my favorite little details in that sequence is that when she's dying on stage, and everybody thinks it's a publicity stunt, there's a few people in the audience who are not so sure, but they don't doubt enough to actually do something about it, because if they get up and try to help and then it's a publicity stunt, they're gonna embarrass themselves. So they're gonna just sit there and hope that everything is all right, and then it isn't. But like if you look at the facial expressions of some of the people in the audience, you can see this doubt about like, wait a second, is this actually real, or is this just like a hoax or like a publicity stunt? So I think everything about that sequence is amazing, I think. So it builds on what the first movie did. It takes it to the next logical step. It develops the characters right then. It's not just a repeat of things you've seen in the first movie. It's very much, even though the formula or like this basic structure of it is quite similar, in the sense that Ghostface starts killing people seemingly unrelated, and then there's an investigation, and there's suspects, and there's false leads, and in the end, Sidney is confronted by the two killers who explain the plot, and then she survives. Like the basic structure of it's the same, but I think all the characters are in different places, and different things are done with the different pieces. So I think this is one of the best examples of how to make a movie that fits in with the first one, but that kind of develops from it and builds on it, I think.
I agree. And it's quite similar to like other like great sequels that have been mentioned, like Aliens and stuff like that, where it's, you know, you're kind of going in for the same beats, but again, the characters have taken good steps forward, logical steps forward, and stuff like that. So yeah, no, definitely agree with that.
Yeah, you're not just getting the same things again. You're getting like a version, like a spin on it.
Yeah.
Did this make you want to see Scream 3?
Yes, actually. Do you know, I'm actually fully invested in the Scream franchise completely. And funnily enough, again, I have like vague memories of like watching this one. I definitely saw Scream 6, the latest one that came out. I saw that one in cinemas, and I actually really enjoyed that one a lot. So I definitely actually will probably check out like Scream 3, 4, and 5 just to kind of like see what it's about. I think you mentioned that they get a little bit shaky towards the middle sort of movies. I think you said that, but yeah, it's definitely maybe at least want to kind of see if Sidney's in the next movie, what the next like kind of like how they plan to switch it up for the third movie, essentially.
Mm-hmm. I think I might like 3 better than 2.
Okay.
Just in terms of enjoying it. But we'll talk about that next time when we've seen Scream 3. But yeah, I think it's definitely I think not a lot of trilogies have good conclusions. And like I think you can count on one hand the number of times it actually worked and it actually serves a purpose, other than we happen to make 3, so we're going to call it a trilogy. But I think Scream is one of those where it is actually a trilogy. So we can talk about that next time.
For me, I'd say no, but yes. It's entertaining, but for me, it's like a popcorn film. So it's one of them ones where it's like, yeah, it's fun for the moment. So I don't know if it holds enough weight for me to want to go and say, oh, okay, I'm excited for the third one. So I'd say I wouldn't mind if it just came on my TV and there was nothing to watch and then I'd watch it. Yeah. But I don't think the way that it ended, I'm just trying to think, okay, so if I was actually there, probably even back in the day, I would have really enjoyed it. But I'm just saying now, because obviously the way that it ended is like, okay, so pretty much we're gonna see it's gonna be the same formula, but now it's gonna be like new character motivation in terms of why that Ghostface killer is the Ghostface killer. So in terms of that reasoning alone, I don't think I'm too interested in that. But in terms of like everything else, in terms of like the kills and just like the way the constant mystery around who around Sidney could be the Ghostface killer and what their reason could be for it, that's interesting. So I think yeah. So I'd say I'm more leaning towards yes.
So for me, I think it might be the opposite, where I don't actually care about Ghostface. Like I like watching him kill people, but like who he is and why he does what he does has never been interesting, at least in these 2 movies so far.
No, I didn't say that's the reason. I didn't say that's the reason for why I'm going to be interested in watching the film. I said that's pretty much going to be the same. I'm saying for me, it's the whole mystery in terms of like, okay, everything else in terms of like the mystery behind who the character could be, as in like who the Ghostface killer could be around her circle, the suspicion, how she handles how pretty much her change. So is she going to become more paranoid and how does she react to that and etc. etc. So it's generally the story rather than the reasoning for why the new Ghostface killer is Ghostface.
Yeah, that's what I was kind of driving at, is that like what these characters do because they're in the situation is more interesting than who the killer is. Especially since it seems kind of random. Like I think you can kind of reshoot the endings of both of these movies and have the killers be somebody else and work just as well. You can come up with an explanation for what they were doing, and like I think the endings are pretty like sectioned off from the rest of the movie in like, at least maybe not entirely, but like in a lot of ways. So like that final scene where there's this big reveal where the villain explains themselves, never the interesting part to me. Like it's this whole like who trusts who and why and what decisions do they make, and like that's always more interesting to me.
Especially in this movie, because the male killer, he kind of like disappears for like half the movie as well. Like you don't see him for a lot of the movie, so you can really just like cut him out and like replace him with anyone else in this and like make them the killer in this.
Any other last thoughts on Scream 2?
Nah, man. So I know Jonathan refers to it as like a popcorn film, but these are just like kind of like good, light-hearted classic movies that you just kind of like sit back and enjoy sometimes, man. Not everything has to be.
I enjoy popcorn movies.
Okay, no, I know you do. But you said that you wouldn't check it out, or you wouldn't like, you always watch it.
Yeah. No, but a lot of the time, popcorn movie kind of means don't think about it too hard, just sit back and enjoy it. And I think there's more in these movies than that. I think there's actual ideas and at least like symbolism and like there are like these themes of fact and fiction and media and reality and all of those things like that. Like that is woven into what's going on. It's not simply put some teenagers in a situation and watch somebody kill them. Like that's a bad slasher, right? And you can enjoy that, but there's not much to engage with beyond that. And I think Scream has more going on than that, I would say.
I understand, but I think with slasher movies, they always have that cheesy aspect to them when it comes to performances. So I think that's what for me waters down the whole. Okay, I hear what you're saying. It does have a lot to like. This Scream differentiates from different other like slasher movies because there's more going on to it, but it still has that cheesy element to it in terms of the way that they act in the film. Okay. So I think that's what kind of like for me does like for me I think for example, Gladiators, which we're gonna get to, but I enjoyed that really. Like I found that really entertaining because in terms of like mainly because of the performances, you know what I'm saying? So I think for me, for a film not to be a popcorn movie, it has to have like everything doesn't have to be perfect, but you know, like it just like pieces just have to kind of like make the puzzle. And if like one of the pieces isn't in the puzzle, as in like the performance, for example, then that kind of doesn't fulfill it for me, if that makes sense, when it comes to me classifying it as either a classic film or popcorn movie. Popcorn movies are great, don't get twisted. They are I enjoy popcorn movies. What's the film called that you guys hate again with Jason Statham?
Beekeeper.
Yeah, it's a classic popcorn movie. You know what I'm saying? That was entertaining. And the performances are good for me. So, but it's not a film that I want to go back and watch. Same with Slasher, yeah. Same with Scream. Yeah, but I get what you guys are saying. It definitely does have more to it than other slasher movies, and I do agree with that. All right, guys. Well, I hope you enjoyed today's episode. This didn't really turn into a debate, but hopefully you enjoyed today's discussion. Have they?
Yeah, I mean, let us know your thoughts down below. Is Scream one of your favorite slasher franchises? Let us know down below. And yeah, if you like us, tell a friend, and if you hate us, tell an enemy.
All right, guys. Hope you guys enjoyed, and we will catch you next week. Au revoir.
Ciao.
Bye bye.